Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 19th of October 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, another kind of thread from Polynya here today that I wanted to go through. Wanted to run through a few things here because I thought it was a really great one. But essentially, Polynya was replying to a tweet from James Wang, who said, or asked the question, what's the pros cons of building a new chain on Cosmos / Polkadot versus doing it as a ZK rollup on Ethereum? So Polynya goes on to answer this question by saying, it's wickedly difficult to build a programmable ZK rollup. At most, 5 or 6 teams are capable of it, but we're seeing multiple optimism forks such as Metis, Boba, Nami, and more. Once ZK rollups tech is open sourced, we'll see many ZKR forks too. Long term, I don't see any reason not to build a rollup. And then Polynya continues, unless you must have your own monolithic self-sovereign chain for whatever reason, in which case the two easiest options are building a Cosmos SDK chain or an EVM chain. There are a gazillion of the latter already, of course, but a rollup will be so much easier in the future. Why easier? You don't have to bootstrap a consensus mechanism, a native token, get centralized exchange integration, build network effects, etc. You can do the latter too, but it's optional. Just plug into the most secure layer in the space. If you want extra data availability, just build a Validium instead. And then Polynya gives a simple example where they say Arbitrum 1 is the only chain other than Ethereum with all the blue chips deployed or committed to deploying. Uniswap, Maker, Aave, Sushi, Balancer, Curve, etc. All there. BSC, Polygon, POS, Avalanche have some of them through incentives, but not all. It's a no-brainer. So, as Crypto Maxi notes here, Polygon is only missing Uniswap. You know, it's funny because Polygon not being, the POS chain not being quote-unquote a true L2, it doesn't really matter. They've still been able to attract the kind of like quote-unquote DeFi blue chip projects because of their allegiance or alignment with Ethereum, which I think is really, really positive. But what I wanted to kind of like focus on was a few points here from Polynya. One thing that I've kind of like been saying for a little while on the refuel is exactly what Polynya has been saying about, why would you want to create like just a roll-up or your own layer 2 instead of creating a layer 1? And I've talked about, constantly about how I think that there's just not going to be these L1s spinning up anymore. It doesn't make any sense to do so. It's much more, it makes much more sense to just launch a layer 2, but it's also going to be much more profitable to launch a layer 2 as well. So even if your kind of like motive is just money and just profit, it's just still better off launching a layer 2. As Polynya notes here, we've already seen this with multiple optimism forks, such as Metis, Boba, and Nami. But Polynya said, like, why is it easier to launch kind of a layer 2? And it's because you don't have to bootstrap a consensus mechanism is a major reason, which means you don't have to bootstrap your own network of, not really miners these days, it's more like validators, right? You don't have to issue a native token to do it. You don't have to get like a token distribution out there. You don't have to have all these expensive kind of running costs. You don't have to worry about consensus at all, really. You just have to worry about, kind of like paying the security on a layer 1 Ethereum, which isn't too much of a worry because if the product that you create at layer 2 is good enough, people will use it and pay fees to use it. And then you can use that fee revenue to pay for layer 1 and then profit the difference, right? Which is actually quite high. You remember that Optimism is donating all profits to public goods. Well, they're already donating $1 million to public goods, right? And Optimism really isn't even. I would still say that their network is still in alpha. It's like still got a whitelist on it. Not many apps on there yet. Still seeing some really nice growth, but they're generating what $150,000 a day in revenue. Same for Arbitrum. So these layer 2s are going to be very, very lucrative in terms of getting kind of like fee revenue. So you're definitely going to see a lot of people spinning them up and not having to worry about to bootstrap a consensus mechanism either, which is huge, right? They don't have to have a native token. I think they're going to have a native token, but for different reasons. They definitely want to decentralize out their sequencers and their validators, which is different to a layer 1. And as I mentioned yesterday, it's just much easier, and the path is much easier for these layer 2s to decentralize over time. They don't need to get centralized exchange integration. They probably will as time goes on, but it's not critical to them, right? You can just basically bridge in from Ethereum layer 1 to these layer 2s, and and pretty much every exchange has Ethereum integration already, so you don't have to rely on that. Not even just pretty much. I think 100% of exchanges have Ethereum integration, so you can just withdraw to Ethereum, and then building just general network effects as well. You plug into Ethereum, you inherit all of Ethereum's network effects, and that's why we've seen so much layer 2 growth, which I'm going to talk about in a sec with regards to Uniswap, but we've seen so much growth so quickly because it's just very easy for people to get into it. And this is growth without native token incentives. There is no native tokens for these layer 2s yet. You may look at some of these side chains, these EVM side chains, and be like, oh, they got lots of adoption really quickly. Well, they had massive liquidity mining programs. Like if you can imagine a layer 2 with a massive liquidity mining program, I'm betting tens of billions of dollars would flow into these things as well. And we're almost at 4 billion TVL without these native incentives, which is pretty cool, at least I think. So it's just going to kind of like get supercharged from there. But, the example that Polynya gives here about, I guess, like Arbitrum 1 and, Crypto Maxi saying even the Polygon POS chain having all these blue chips as well is very important because users are going to go where the apps are, and the apps are only going to be deployed to things that developers feel like that there's actually going to be traction on, and there's actually going to be long-term health on. The funny thing is that Aave hasn't deployed to Arbitrum yet, but they deployed to some EVM side chains, some of the newer ones as well, and people are like, well, why aren't you deploying to Arbitrum? And I remember one of the people at Aave said, well, we don't want to deploy our old tech to Arbitrum. They want to deploy their new tech there. So they're happy deploying their old existing tech to these EVM side chains because it's just very easy for them to do so, right? It doesn't take much. They can just basically port it over. They don't have to get new audits or anything like that. But if they're building something new, like Aave V3, for example, then they definitely want that their flagship product to be on the flagship platform, that being Ethereum and its L2 ecosystem. You saw the same thing with Uniswap with V3. V3 is the only thing that's launching on these kind of like L2s, and I'm hoping Uniswap also launches on the Polygon POS chain with V3. That'd be really cool to see. But yeah, I could give like examples from like the other examples too. But generally, the users aren't going to go to chains that just don't have the apps on them, and that's why all the EVM side chains exist, and why they're the ones that are getting adoption is because beforehand, pretty much all the chains that didn't have EVM compatibility and they didn't really get any adoption. They were ghost chains because of the fact that it's much, much, much harder to bootstrap an ecosystem from nothing. And, I guess like one thing that Solana is doing that I actually respect for them doing is trying to bootstrap an ecosystem from scratch, right? They're not, EVM compatible right now. They have like a new programming language, not a new one, like a different one called Rust, that people can work in. They have different kind of architecture of how they're doing transactions with parallelization and stuff like that. But in saying that, they're also going to have a, I guess, like a platform building on top of Solana that allows for EVM compatibility as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how much adoption that gets over the vanilla Solana chain. But, all the other kind of things like the Avalanche C chain, Phantom, the Polygon POS chain, of course, as well. They're all EVM side chains, and that's exactly why you've seen kind of like this rapid kind of deployment of these top protocols that have typically been deployed to only Ethereum. The kind of like Polygon is a bit of a different example because the POS chain isn't just like your regular side chain, right? It has kind of like commitments to Ethereum, and it also has its staking logic on Ethereum. So, and I guess like, as I said, like it's more politically aligned, or I guess like socially aligned with Ethereum as well. So yeah, just a really great little kind of like thread from Polynya here. And then I think there was a bit of forks in the thread that came off of this, and I think people kind of like asked some questions about like about different things. You can go read this for yourself if you want. It'll be linked in the YouTube description, of course. But yeah, just another day, another Polynya shout out. So Ross Middleton from DiverisiFi here announced that the Polygon POS chain to diversify stablecoin bridge has now enabled over 1,000 people to avoid the high L1 gas fees. Now, this is what I think I've mentioned this before on the refuel, where I basically said you can have bridges that basically go to an Ethereum L2 without actually touching the Ethereum main chain. So this is going through Polygon's POS chain to DiverisiFi, which is kind of like Ethereum, layer 2. It's technically it's a Validium, but like it still kind of like verifies itself with Ethereum, verifies the proofs there, and you can see like the medium transaction size, the mean transaction size, the most popular token, and the fee. So the fee is only $1 to kind of like move between here. If you had to go through Ethereum layer 1, the fee would probably be $10 or $20 or something like that. So obviously a nice order of magnitude decrease here. I think we're going to see much more of this as well. what's really cool is the fact that I mean, the thing with the bridges though is that you have to remember, as I've explained on the refuel, I think I explained it last Friday, is that it depends what bridge you're using, because if the bridge has a bunch of like admin keys, or if the bridge is centralized in any way, if it's got a multi-sig or whatever, then your funds are only as safe as kind of like the bridge there, depending on kind of like depending on what you do. Because if you so this is the funny thing about bridges, is that I'm going to give an example here, because it's a bit difficult to reason about, but it'll make sense if I give an example. If you bridge from, say, the Polygon POS chain through this bridge to DiverisiFi, and you have your funds on DiverisiFi, say you have like some stable coins on there. Well, while those kind of like and kind of like, say you wanted to go back to the POS chain. Well, if that bridge gets compromised, then you wouldn't be able to go back the same way you came in. Now, if you removed your funds from DiverisiFi and went to Ethereum layer 1, then the risk goes to someone else, because you have the funds on layer 1, and you've basically kind of like removed that risk of holding that bridge risk from yourself to someone else. So it gets really complicated, and that's why I always try to like warn people about these bridges. Obviously, I'm a big advocate of them, but also warn people that not all of them are created equal. Like, a lot of them still have centralized controls. A lot of them can be compromised, and it is definitely not something you should be putting like lots and lots of money into. But in saying that, you could, in terms of like what's safer, using the kind of like native bridges, like the Arbitrum and Optimism bridge, I consider to be safer. But still, they're centralized because of the fact that there's upgradable contracts and stuff like that. But you know, it's still just trade-offs at this early stage of the game. But I think just understanding like where your funds are, what the risks are when bridging between different chains is very important. But it's good to see kind of like bridges bypassing Ethereum layer 1 to save users costs at the end of the day. Like, obviously not everyone's going to be able to afford to bridge what, you know, passing through layer 1. So having alternative options is really important, I believe. All right, so I did mention that I wanted to talk about Uniswap's growth on layer 2s recently. So Uniswap V3, I mean, Hayden put out a tweet today where he said Uniswap V3 on layer 2, Arbitrum plus optimistic Ethereum, doing an all-time high volume of $115 million. And then he went on to say L2 season is here. Now, I've got the stats up here on Uniswap. You can kind of like see it here. Basically, this is Uniswap L1 volume for just V3. This isn't V2. V2's over here. It's separate. I'll go through that in a sec. But V3 over the last 24 hours had $1.33 billion of volume, which is obviously a lot of volume. It is by far the largest DEX on Ethereum, processing the most amount of volume. And that's been that way for a little while now. Then you can see up here, you can switch from Ethereum to Optimism. So if we switch to Optimism, we can see over the last 24 hours, they did $10 million worth of volume. But I think Hayden was going off this kind of stat here, the $12 million. Then you can see at other times it's done even more, like 20 million plus here. But basically, we count the last 24 hours, which is about, say, 10 to 12 million. Then we can switch to Arbitrum and see that Arbitrum's doing a lot of volume, like $80 million if we look at the same day here. And that's definitely because Arbitrum has more apps live on the network than Optimism, so there's more activity going on there. But taking those two together gets to Hayden's kind of like 115 million kind of like volume here. Now, what I wanted to talk about was the fact that if you take 115 million and you kind of like map it out to L1's volumes, which were what, 1.33 billion, or if we go back to the day here, it's like, yeah, sorry, let me just get back to the day here. It's like 1.4 billion, just say. Then you can kind of say that, like, what, it's around 8% or something like that. So L2s are doing 8% of layer 1 volume so far, and they're still very fresh and very new. So it's really, really cool to see the increased adoption here. I think once Optimism removes their whitelist and opens the floodgates, and Arbitrum releases things like Arbitrum Nitro, and we have more apps go live there, we'll slowly see more of a transition happen here as well. And you remember, on Uniswap kind of like V3 on layer 1, there's also a lot of liquidity mining programs happening there, not from Uniswap itself, but from other projects having LP pools on there, whereas those programs may be happening in some limited fashion on L2s, but not in a big way just yet. So slow and steady, really. 8% is kind of like great to see there. But at the same time, I mean, Ethereum layer 1 volumes and Uniswap on Ethereum layer 1 has had much more time to gain network effects here. And this is just V3. Like, it surprised me because I looked at that and I looked at V2, and V2 did like, if we go to the same date yesterday, $400 million of volume yesterday on V2. So, yeah, it's not just like 1.4 billion, it becomes like 1.8 billion. So, and that means the L2s would be a bit less there. But I think, we've seen other L2s I've got L2 beat up here. But we've seen other L2s like DYDX have a massive amount of value locked in there, but doing a massive amount of volume as well, like billions of dollars of kind of like daily volume during volatile periods on their exchange. So, if I don't think it shows it on L2 beat here, the kind of like trading volumes, but like the TVL kind of, I guess, speaks for itself as well. It's like a lot more people using the exchange too there. But you can kind of like see, and the reason why I have L2 beat up here as well is because on the topic of L2 growth, you can see it's becoming much more distributed, right? When we kind of like skyrocketed up the first time, most of the value was locked in Arbitrum, but now it's becoming more distributed. Arbitrum has 2.25 billion locked. DYDX is 838 million, Optimism is at 261 million, Loopring at 122, and then you have like the kind of like long tail here, and it's just increasing over time. You can see that we're basically at all-time highs in terms of value locked, which is really awesome to see. But I've mentioned before that value locked is kind of like not a great metric to use anymore. I feel like it just became kind of like a target rather than a great measure. But the volumes, as I just went through, speak for themselves. People are using these things and they're paying to use them. As I mentioned, like if you go to cryptofees.info, you'll be able to see Uniswap and Arbitrum generating this fee revenue for their network. So this, and the reason why I always point to fee revenue as a really great kind of view into network usage is because it isn't impossible to fake it, but it's expensive to fake it, like very expensive. That's why people always I sometimes see people kind of like say, oh, how do you know that Ethereum's L1 activity isn't all just wash trading in bots? And it's like, well, because they're paying a lot of money to use the network, right? And the thing is that 80% of that value is being burned as well. So you can't even bring up the argument that, oh, miners are colluding to basically take all the fees and basically pay themselves and faking activity on the network. You can't even use that logic because even if they are, they're burning 80% of the value to extract that 20% from it. And I mean, it just doesn't make any economic sense. So from that point of view, it's just like a really, really great measure of kind of activity. And then on top of that, for the L2s, people could say, oh, well, the L2s is fake as well. Like, what if it's the Optimism team kind of like just running bots or whatever and paying themselves the fees? They're not, right? They're actually committing to give away all the profit to public goods. So I don't know, people kind of trying to bring this up, and it always just puzzles me. But I think it stems from the fact that there are networks, I believe, that do fake their kind of like fee activity. And I've mentioned before how I think that BSC, Binance Smart Chain, is, I mean, I haven't looked into it. I don't have any proof, like definitive proof. It's kind of like very hard to prove this, but I have a hunch that they do this because for two reasons. The first reason is they control the validators, basically. So they essentially are paying themselves the fees if they wanted to, right? If they wanted to fake fee revenue, it doesn't cost them anything to do that. And two, why haven't they implemented fee burning yet? BNB always gets burnt, right? Like, I don't know about lately, but like traditionally BNB has been burnt based on kind of like profits and revenues from Binance, the exchange. So why haven't they introduced EIP 1559 style burning onto BSC? It's very easy for them to do that because it's the same code, and they can just literally steal it from Ethereum and put it onto BSC. Why have they not done that yet? Well, my hunch is that because they're faking the fee revenue. And why are they faking the fee revenue? Because people look at the fee revenue as a kind of like as a measure of like activity on the network. And if you go to cryptofees.info, I'm pretty sure BSC is like number 3 on there, generating like $2 to $3 million of 24-hour fee revenue. I don't think that is organic. I really don't believe that's organic. And I'm not just saying it because I don't like BSC, because I think it's centralized and all that sort of stuff. I'm not saying that at all. Just based on the facts, that's what I think. Because it's very obvious that CZ wants to pump BNB, and why wouldn't he? It's his token. So why not introduce fee burning for BSC? And I just really think it's because if they do that, that means that like 80% of the fees would be burnt forever, which means that they would it would be not economic for them to fake the fee revenue. But anyway, that's a bit of a tangent there. But It's why you have to look at different metrics and kind of like different statistics in kind of like on a holistic view. You can't just look at one and draw conclusions. Just like you can't look at TVL and be like, oh, this project got $5 billion of TVL within 24 hours. It must be good. And then you miss all the kind of context around that. It probably has a massive liquidity mining program. The TVL probably left a week later. The actual protocol was just crappy and was just farmed. This has happened multiple times before. This isn't like me just speculating here. It's actually happened. So you have to take everything as a holistic view, and you have to actually look at each metric and kind of like draw conclusions from it based on, okay, why is the capital here in total value locked? You know, what it doesn't make economic sense for the capital to be here. Is it sticky capital? Okay, what's the fee revenue like? Where are the fees going? Is it easily faked and spoofed? Like, is wash trading easy to be done here? All that sort of stuff. So definitely something to consider. And you know, hopefully I can kind of like. Hopefully I've kind of like given you something to think about around that as well, because I just see too many people looking at metrics and kind of like just pulling insight from them, when you need to pull insight from much more than just like one metric. You have to take a holistic view of things. All right, so CelarNetwork announced that their cBridge 2.0 testnet is now live at test-cbridge-v2.celar.network. It comes with a simpler UX. It's not 2-click anymore. It's 1-click. Lower cost, so lower gas and efficient pricing. Easier exit, easier LP. No need to run a node. Single-click liquidity management and farming integrated. And it's built to support billions of dollars of volume every day. So, and they go on to say, you know, answer the question, when mainnet. Then they say, we treat security with the highest standard with 3 audits and a rigorous internal process, a review process ongoing. A couple of new features will be rolled out during testnet as well. Based on the auditing timeline, we plan for a mid-November mainnet launch. So if you've been using the kind of like Celar cBridge here, or interested in using kind of like their 2.0 bridge on testnet, definitely go check this out. I'm excited to see it go live on mainnet here. And, you know, very excited to see just more kind of like something like CelarNetwork continue to build, because they've been around for quite a while, actually. I remember meeting Mo Dong, I think he's their CEO and co-founder, back in I think it was 2019, early 2019 at EdCon. I remember having a chat with him there. Really, really great guy. And I actually recently had a call with him as well, just talking through these sorts of things. They're still building, right? They've kind of like building tools that people are actually using as well, and seeing a lot of adoption here. And I'm just really bullish on the project overall. I don't hold any Celar tokens. I'm not just saying this because I'm shilling my bags. I'm just very bullish on the project and think that they're doing really, really great work. So definitely go check them out if you haven't yet. So this is finally been publicly announced. Obol Network, which I think that's how you say it. Obol Network today announced that they have raised $6 million to build a kind of like multi-operator validator network for ETH2. And it's basically, I participated in this. That's why I know about it. And that's why I said finally it's public. I participated as an angel investor in this because it is sorely needed. And I'll explain why this product is sorely needed. So essentially what this product does, and you can see kind of like a nice graphic here, is that and I'll just explain kind of like in the tweet here what they say. They said, the Obol network is designed to be built on top of with the intention of accelerating the innovation and robustness of future staking products. The project will begin the mission by focusing on proof of stake Ethereum. So it's not just going to be Ethereum, it's going to be other proof of stake networks as well, but obviously just focusing on Ethereum here. The kind of like, this is the way the network works, where you've got like the Obol network validators at the bottom, and then people can kind of like build on top of it. The whole point of it is to basically provide infrastructure for individuals, enterprises, pool operators to kind of like spin up better staking infrastructure themselves. So for example, with Ethereum staking, there's something called SSV, or Secret Shared Validator, which is essentially a way to split up the kind of like validator keys so that you still keep your withdrawal key, if you're delegating to a pool or something like that, and being able to kind of like withdraw your funds at any time, while they still they run the validator for you, and they can validate on your behalf or whatever, but your funds are not at risk from that pool operator kind of going offline or not processing your withdrawal, which is really cool. And the second kind of thing that they're trying to do as well is make it so you can run kind of like an active setup, where essentially you can have like 2 active instances of the kind of like the same validator, but you're not going to get like slashed, because you're not going to sign the same kind of like attestation or attest to the same kind of like blocks, because that is a very stiff kind of like slashing event there if you do that. And that's just like not natively supported within the Ethereum protocol itself. So there's tools being built on top of it to kind of like to kind of like make that happen and make it easier for people to kind of, I guess, get involved there. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. This is one of the projects that I've backed lately that I'm most bullish on, and I was just really excited to be involved with. You can see here that they have like a bunch of different supporters. Coinbase Ventures, what is it? Like familiar names here: the Lao, Chorus One, staking facilities, Delphi Digital, and then a bunch of angels as well. Myself, David Hoffman, Ryan Sean Adams, Evan Van Ness, Mariana Conti, a bunch of others in there, and they've also got a kick-ass advisory board too. In kind of like I think it's on their website, but basically they have. I'm not sure if they've if they've got it on the kind of like press release here from the block. God, where's the website right now? I'm gonna have to go to here and go to the website. Maybe they've got it listed on their website. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, they do have a very kick-ass set of people kind of like working on or working with Obol Network, and kind of like making sure this is built correctly. So I'm really excited to be part of the team. Definitely go check this out if you haven't yet, and if you want to learn more about it, there's a thread here, and of course you can go to their website. All right, so DraftKings announced today that them and Polygon have entered into a strategic collaboration for DraftKings Marketplace. And additionally, DraftKings is also now able to become a validator on the Polygon network. Now, I didn't know what DraftKings was until recently, and apparently it's kind of like a fantasy sports thing. And after I heard that, I was like, okay, well that's why I don't know what it is, because I don't follow sports or anything like that. But what I find interesting about this is not only the NFT kind of portion of it. Obviously, being fantasy sports, DraftKings is doing their NFT stuff through Polygon's POS chain. What I find really interesting about this is DraftKings actually becoming a validator for the Polygon network. Now, I mentioned before about Obol Network basically opening up ETH2 staking to more enterprises, kind of like getting them more involved here. I think, the same thing's going to happen for all of these networks. And I think that we're going to be seeing like these big kind of like companies become validators or public validators in these networks, which I think is really, really cool at the end of the day. Having kind of like the support, I guess, like of these companies while they've got their same products on the network is definitely a net positive there. So if you're into fantasy sports, you want to learn more about DraftKings and Polygon, definitely go check out this press release here. All right, so there was a bit of news that came out, I guess, from the Walter Bloomberg account that the New York Attorney General's office is directing 2 crypto companies to shut down. Now, it's funny because like I don't think it's been officially released what those companies are, but there was actually a leak in kind of like the Word documents that were attached to kind of the press release here, and you can see that the 2 companies that were named were Celsius and Nexo. Nexo denied, I think, Nexo kind of like denied, getting any kind of like cease and desist because they actually weren't offering their own product and exchange in New York, so it makes little sense for them to be receiving a cease and desist. So it's a bit of confusion here, but I guess what I wanted to focus on was more around the fact that, like, I mean, from what I've read, there's actually been no clear path that these regulators have given these kind of like centralized crypto institutions to actually get regulated or to get compliant with the financial regulations. And that's why a lot of them just simply say, well, we're not even going to bother with kind of like operating in this jurisdiction, and we're not even going to bother operating in the US. There's plenty of DeFi apps that have basically said, well, DeFi front ends, I should say, not the smart contracts, like DYDX, for example, that have basically said, well, we're not going to serve US users because it's just crap. Like, there's just no path to being kind of like, compliant with the regulations and all this sort of stuff. And I've ranted and raved about regulations plenty of times. I'm not going to kind of go into that again. But, obviously in New York, there's a bit of a protection racket going on because of the Wall Street and stuff like that. But this is just crazy. I mean, if you don't have a path to being compliant and then like you get a cease and desist letter because you're not compliant, like how is that even fair? It goes back to the SEC bullying Coinbase into essentially stopping its Lend product because for whatever reason. It was just so unfair and definitely not something that kind of like we want to see. But at the same time, it's beautiful that they can't stop the DeFi smart contracts. They can go after Uniswap Labs as much as they want. They can never stop Uniswap's smart contracts. Maybe I shouldn't say never. They could if they took over the entire Ethereum network, but good luck doing that, right? It's not an easy task to do. And I don't think that they would even bother going that far, or they would, know how to do that each way. Especially when we move to kind of proof of stake, I think it's going to be even harder than it is today with proof of work, because they have to buy the stake, right, to kind of like take over the network. But that's a whole different discussion. I'm coming up on time here, so I wanted to talk about one other thing, which is an interesting tweet from Marius from the Geth team, where he basically put out a tweet that said, "Did you know that Ethereum processes the same amount of gas per day right now as the first 1.2 million blocks These 1.2 million blocks were mined over a period of 8 months. We've come a long way both in usage and performance. So, I mean, this might be obvious to some people. And, you know, the funny thing is the gas limit was actually much, much lower back then than it is today. I think it was... I think it was like 1 million or something like that, or maybe even less than that during the early days. But essentially, the growth of Ethereum has been just amazing to see, right? And I mean, I'm probably going to revisit this in a few years and see that the amount of gas that Ethereum is using per day, kind of like you know, in a few years, is going to like dwarf what we're even using today. Especially with sharding, like it depends how sharding works and if it measures it by gas, you know, gas limits or something similar to what we have today. But it's just you know, this just illustrates the point that these networks can start off like very small, basically from zero, have no activity for quite a while, and then blossom into what we see today. And it goes back to what I was saying about these L2 chains and EVM side chains and things like that. There's a very kind of like simple path for these EVM chains to gain adoption, and it's very easy for them to do so as well because of the fact that there's just like these network effects around the EVM, and it's easy for projects to deploy and all that sort of stuff there. So I just thought this is a little cool little factoid from Marius here. And I'm glad that he shared it because it kind of like, and it goes into a thread as well. So you can read the little thread here, but it was just an interesting little thing to see there. But on that note, I think I'm going to end it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.